Today we're going to spend some time briefly going over major issues with the report that we want you all to keep an eye out for, but we'll start today with a welcome and some reminders from both Leon Littau and Vicki Pretlow from OCS, and then we'll jump into the webinar. Just a reminder, this webinar is being recorded. Another reminder is that if you look in the kind of control panel of your GoToWebinar, you'll see that there is a handout. So all of these slides are in PDF, and you can download them directly from that control panel. If you have issues with this, go ahead and put it in the chat bar or send us an email, and we'll get you a copy. So with that, Leon, I'd like to turn it over to you.
Thank you, and good afternoon and good morning also. The performance data form needs to be approved by OMB, and it's going through the process now. And so right now we cannot require you to provide data for that, but as soon as we get indication that it's been approved, we will send out an action transmittal with the final due date and instructions for accessing and submitting the form in OLDC. Although you can't currently certify or submit the FY17 report in the OLDC, we encourage you to prepare information needed for your report, so you'll be ready to go once the report is cleared. There are no changes in the items in the report, so I know, excuse me, people on the phone have done this before. There should be no surprises. And with that, I will turn it back to Melissa. Thank you.
Thank you, Leon. I'd like to turn it over to Vicki at OCS.
Hi, everyone. This is Vicki Pretlow, and I'm a liaison here in the Division of Energy Assistance. We would like to welcome all of you to the webinar, and thank you for carving some time out of your busy schedule to jump on and to learn with us and get some more information and guidance on the Grantee Survey. I would also just like to remind everyone that we are here in the office to assist you if you have any questions or need any guidance as it pertains to your grant. And we have listed here that are showing on your screen some of the items that we can help you with: your program operations. We can provide you with resources, any HHS requirements, OLDC access, anything in that vein. We are here and happy to assist you. It is me, and then I have three colleagues here: Kate Thomas, Patrice West, and Josephine Rago-Adia. Please give us a call if you need any assistance. We're here to help. We're happy to help. And this link here is a link that will send you to our contact information. So again, welcome. Thank you for joining, and we hope that you're able to get some really great information to help you on that Grantee survey. So now I will turn it over to Melissa, and she will go into a brief overview of what we're going to learn today and move on into the presentation.
Thanks, Vicki. So this webinar focuses on Module 1, which is the Grantee Survey portion of the LIHEAP Performance Data Form. This form is required for states and the District of Columbia to complete. This is definitely a high-level overview, so you'll notice this webinar is only 30 minutes, which means we're briefly going to touch on common issues, things to watch out for and check for as you're completing your report. If you're new or you need some more detailed explanation, we did do a line-by-line report overview on January 3rd, and that was recorded and is available on the OCS website. This webinar is going to focus on those common issues, and so some of the things we'll talk about are the basic rules that you need to keep in mind, some of the data validations and checks that you can do, but also that Apprise and OLDC will do. Some of the proactive steps we've been taking, you may have gotten emails, so I'll kind of talk with you about that. We have a new resource this year for all reports, the Check Before You Submit document. We'll talk about that, as well as common reporting issues and grantee resources. Because it's such a short webinar, we're only going to do Q&A at the end. But if you have questions as we're moving through, I'd encourage you to either type your question into the chat box, and Michelle will get it at a prize, or you can raise your hand at any time and ask a question. So just to remind everyone, all of these required reports, the model plan, the household report, the performance data form, both modules of it, really the purpose of these is to assure consistent reporting across grantees. We know LIHEAP is a block grant, and so many of you have very unique and diverse programs. But the performance data form, along with the household report and all those other reports, is a report required by OCS that all state grantees must complete. And this is because OCS ultimately, in spite of the fact that we all have very different programs, has to report consistent information to Congress. And so these forms allow OCS to do that. Now, with that in mind, if you want to go to the next slide, we recognize that there are many things that are so unique that they don't quite fit into the report, or that require additional explanation because maybe they fit in multiple lines, or you're not sure which line they go in. And so we really encourage you, and you'll hear this throughout this 30 minutes, to use the notes section liberally. OCS uses these notes in tables and footnotes in the report to Congress. And so on the next slide, I'm going to show you, this is an excerpt from the FY 2014 report to Congress, where we estimate the state's uses of federal funds. And if you go to the next slide, I know it's a little busy, but the point is, you'll notice down in the footnotes that we explain each of the numbers and the variations in those numbers. So for example, my favorite is 13. Indiana's energy crisis assistance funds are obligated here, but there's no other line item to capture this cost, for example. And so we use your notes to clarify things so that when your legislators or are looking at this, either at the state or federal level, you're giving them as much context as you can to understand the numbers that have to be consistently reported across all states. So one of the things that's important is for you to know how your report is reviewed, because if you understand how we're reviewing it, you can go ahead and do some of these checks before we even see it. And so it's important to know that we start by looking at the current year data. So in other words, we look at, in addition to your grantee survey for 2017, we're looking at all of your other 2017 forms. And we've said this in previous webinars, that all of your forms and all of your reports work together to tell a story about your program. And it's important that there is consistency between them. And so that's really kind of what we're looking for here. We compare within the form itself. So we look at total sources versus uses of funds. Remember, it's kind of like reconciling your checkbook here. We're going to make sure that the uses equal the sources. And if there's a mismatch, we're going to be in touch with you. We look at your data and compare it to the household report. So if funding was obligated to a particular type of assistance in your grantee survey, but we don't see those households in the household report, we're going to contact you, and vice versa. We're going to look at your model plan. So if your model plan says that you'll provide a particular type of assistance, but we don't see funding reported in the grantee survey, or we see funding reported, but it's not in your model plan, we're going to reach out to you. We also look at your model plan to look at income thresholds, because remember, the grantee survey includes maximum income for households of 4, and so we're going to look at that and compare it to your model plan to see if that is consistent. And this, to me, is the biggest one, and where we see a lot of grantees struggle a little bit. We're going to be looking at your 2017 grantee survey and looking at your 2017 carryover and reallotment report to make sure that the funds you say you're carrying over into the next federal fiscal year actually match what you said you were going to carry over in your 2017 report. And this goes to this slide as well. Once again, this is where this carryover piece can get tricky. And I want to underscore, we did this in the line by line, A lot of people, your carryover and reallotment report is due before the end of the fiscal year. And so it's very important that you, when you do go in and do your financial reports at the end of the year or after the year is over, that you go back to your carryover and reallotment report and update those figures, because we are doing cross validations. And so it's important that the numbers match across the board. What we're going to look for are two things. If line 6, section 3 of your grantee survey, which is all funds carried over from the previous year, does not match the amount in line 7 of your 2016 survey that says how much you were carrying into the year, we're going to give you a call. So we want to see basically the money that you said you were carrying out of 2016. We want to see that reflected in your sources in 2017. Apprise will also contact grantees if the amount in line 6, section 3 in the grantee survey, all funds carried over from the previous year, doesn't match the carryover amount in the 2016 carryover and reallotment report. Once again, this is about making sure that when you're reporting that money is coming out of one year and into another, that all of those reports line up and those numbers match up. If there are inconsistencies, you must put a note in the notes section. Otherwise, Apprise will get a hold of you. Some of you found this in your household report, perhaps. But anytime you see a discrepancy, or if you think that there could be something misinterpreted, you should be putting something in the notes section. Many of these validation checks are programmed into OLDC. So this means that for those of you who might be new to this, you're going to get a warning error or a fatal error message pop up if you enter something that isn't congruent. So warning messages say the data might be correct, but we want you to double check it, and we want you to add an additional explanation in the notes section of the form. A fatal error, when it pops up, is not going to let you continue. So things must be corrected before you're able to submit your LIHEAP performance data form. So there's some steps that we recommend you take. If you want to go to the next slide. If a warning message appears and you have an explanation for the warning and you've confirmed that the data is correct, add a note. That will keep us from contacting you in most cases. If a warning message appears and you don't know how to resolve it, give us a call and we'll talk through it and figure out what's going on. And similarly, if a fatal error occurs which prevents you from submitting your report and you're not quite sure what's wrong or how to handle this, give us a call and we'll work together to resolve the reporting issue. So one of the things you may have noticed is that in late December, Apprise sent each grantee an email to remind them of issues identified during the 2016 grantee survey review. And so basically these were customized emails that were sent to each of you to say, look, you had this issue with your report last year. We're giving you a heads up so that you can review the report again this year and make sure you don't make the same mistakes. One of the things we found is that oftentimes these reports are built into IT systems, and when you went back to fix a report last year, you may not have fixed the canned report in the IT system or your reporting protocols in your office, and so this gives you a chance just to remember, oh, okay, I want to make sure I don't make these mistakes again. And then so we're just encouraging you to take another look. It will minimize the time needed when Apprise calls you and asks you to revise your form, so it's important to pay attention to those emails. We did email several grantees. This isn't applicable to everyone, but for some of you it is. Some of you were go-getters and you initiated your 2017 forms prior to the sources of funds data being pre-populated. And so these are steps for you in particular to take in order to submit your form. You'll need to delete your current version and reinitialize the form and confirm that lines 1, 3, and 6 are pre-populated with the correct amount. I will say number 3 is something everyone should do. You know, we talked about this a lot in the line-by-line instructions, that humans make mistakes, and those sources of funds are pre-populated, but it's very important that you check them against your own records internally to make sure that they are correct. We have found instances in the past where they're not, and grantees spend a lot of time banging their heads against the wall trying to get things to reconcile when those initial numbers aren't correct to begin with. So it's very important that you check those. And if you see an error, to get in touch with your liaison right away. I can't underscore enough the value of this resource. It's the new check before you submit document. Apprise basically went through and said, these are all the checks we run. These are the most common issues that we see. Let's create a checklist so that grantees or whoever's compiling the report in your office can go through and just double check the things that commonly come up. We really encourage you to use this form proactively. So get your form done or to the point where you think it's done, and then go through. If you want to go to the next slide, go through, and it's basically just a yes/no kind of check document. And if you can answer yes to all the questions, you're ready to certify and submit your document. It's important to note that there are some checks on there that are a little more complicated than others. And so Apprise has done a great job of really spelling out the explanations that accompany each check. And we just make sure that you read that, because some of them are multi-part, and it's important that you're checking really taking all the right steps. The check before you submit document was emailed by Apprise in late December, and it can also be found at the performance management website, and we've included the link here. I will say also, just a quick addition, this is a new thing that we are trying, and we got some feedback on the household report check before you submit document. And so if any of you use this and find that there would be something that's more helpful or could be made more clear, I encourage you to get a hold of us with your feedback. So we're going to go into common reporting issues. These are things that we saw most frequently as issues among the report. The first is average benefits by fuel type. This is line A5 in section 4 of the Grantee Survey. Poverty threshold inconsistencies was the second issue. And the third is the reporting of emergency furnace repair and replacement funds. So we're going to just kind of do a slide on each of these. We saw 13 grantees face issues reporting the average annual total LIHEAP benefit. Now, to be fair, last year was the first year this data field was required, so a lot of people were getting up to speed and figuring out what it meant. This is reported in line 5 of section 4 of the Grantee Survey. The averages in this row should be based only on those households for whom the state is able to obtain 12 months of energy bill data. So this is basically, we're going to be doing a cross-check, right, for Section B of Module 2, which is the performance measures form. And you'll see that in the second to last bullet here. This line should be equal to line B1 of Section 5 of the performance data form. So what we're looking for here when we talk about bill payment assistance is any heating, cooling, crisis, and supplemental assistance used to pay household energy bills. So we're not talking about weatherization. We're not talking about furnace repair and replacement. We're talking about money that's applied to a bill. And when we look at averages, we're looking at you combining all of the different kinds of bill payment assistance and then taking an average. And this is spelled out more clearly in the line-by-line instructions, and I'd encourage you to take a look if you struggled with this last year or are struggling with it this year. Also, Apprise is always willing to help. If there's one thing you'll notice besides taking notes, I'm putting things in the notes section, it's that Apprise is ready to assist at every step. And no one should be taking a lot of time to figure out something, or spending hours trying to figure out what something means. Just pick up the phone and give us a call. We may be able to help you pretty quickly. On the next issue, poverty threshold inconsistencies. 12 grantees reported poverty thresholds that were inconsistent with the information in their model plans or with the reporting instructions. This is a terrific slide, by the way, for those of you who use different poverty thresholds throughout the year or with different program components or with different populations. This slide is a keeper on your cubicle wall or your office wall. Grantees must report the maximum annual or annualized dollar income cutoff for a 4-person household that was in effect at the beginning of FY 2017 for each type of assistance in their program. However, if a program component began after the release of the 2017 federal poverty guidelines, the grantee may choose to report the cutoffs based on 2017 guidelines. So an example, some of you offer cooling programs that obviously start later in the year, and you opt to use the new 2017 guidelines for that cooling program. It's going to obviously be different than the 2016 guidelines you used for the heating component. So what we ask you to do is to put whatever you used and make sure you add a note if it's the 2017 guidelines. Some of you use multiple income cutoffs for different groups of households. What we are asking you to do is report the lower cutoff in the report, and then in the note section, we ask you to indicate what the other cutoffs are and the groups of households to which they apply. So for example, some of you may have a lower income cutoff for elderly or disabled or particular populations. We want you to use the lowest cutoff for whatever that component is: heating, cooling, crisis, weatherization. Make sure you use the lowest, and then put a note section if you are varying it among other populations. And then finally, we had 9 grantees face difficulties reporting funds for emergency furnace repair and replacement. And so this is a great slide as well, because it gives you a kind of a visual of what it is we expect to see. Grantees with emergency furnace repair and replacement programs should report funding obligated to this component in its own line under other crisis assistance. So you'll need to actually type it in. As you can see on D1 here, that's what this person has done. You'll need to report the amount of money obligated to this, as well as the average benefit and the maximum annual income cutoffs for this program component. The only time we'd ever want to see emergency furnace repair and replacement folded into a different program component or not on its own line is if you're unable to report that amount separately, and that should be a rare exception. If this is the case, or you're not sure if this is the case, we ask you to get a hold of us, but we also would want you to add a note indicating which line contains the funding obligated to emergency furnace repair and replacement. So some final reminders. As this is really a repeat of what Leon said, the performance data form is currently in review by the Office of Management and Budget. Upon approval, HHS will publish an action transmittal with a final due date and instructions for accessing and submitting the form in OLDC. Although you all can't currently certify or submit your form, you can prepare the report and the information needed for it. And so we encourage you to do that. Take steps to do that now. There are no changes from the FY 2016 performance data form. So for those of you who built the report last year and did it in an accurate way, you shouldn't need to change your specs. This is a handy reminder we put in most of our webinars, and partially because there are multiple steps to OLDC, but it's also just a really nice reminder that you shouldn't wait till the last minute. For many of you, if you haven't logged in recently or you have a different person doing a report than did your household report, you will need to make sure your login is updated and that you can actually get in to do the form. And then you have to take multiple steps: saving, validating, certifying, and submitting. And so waiting until the last half hour on the day that it's due is not particularly a wise idea. There are lots of resources, even more than is listed here. We've listed the 3 that we think are really important. Check before you submit tool. I can't say enough about using this. It is new. We understand that there could be some improvements, and we look forward to hearing from you about what those might be. But it's really a valuable tool for whoever is putting together the report, or if you have someone else putting together the report and you, as a coordinator, are going to do the last check on it, for example. You're going to double check their data. This is a great tool to use to do that. We have the 2016 Action Transmittal and Instructions for reference. As we mentioned, the AT and instructions for 2017 will not come out until this has been approved by OMB. However, because there have been no changes in the forms, the instructions are relevant for completing this year's form. And then some of you are new and are looking at this for the first time, and it's helpful to have a frame of reference from prior years to see if you're even in the same ballpark, or if something looks way off to you. You can look at your past year grantee survey data on the data warehouse, and if you need help logging into that, go ahead and reach out to Apprise, and we'll make sure you have credentials and permissions to get logged in to see your own state data. There's some, this slide is full of OLDC resources. So this is, if you need help specifically with OLDC, your login, or something isn't letting you move on to the next step, or you just aren't sure what's going on, this is the best resource to go to first. Both the phone number and website are here, and they are open extended hours so that they can reach people on both coasts. And finally, there are a lot of one-on-one support resources. I can't underscore enough. Do not spend a lot of time banging your head against your desk to try and figure something out. Chances are we've worked through it with another grantee, and we can help you move through it pretty quickly or answer your questions. And we don't mind getting multiple emails with little questions as you're going along. So I'd recommend you to contact your OCS liaison, especially if you have programmatic questions like, you know, what goes in particular program components or how you've designed that. But the Apprise team is also available to help as you compile your reports. Dan, Jorge, and Michelle are on the East Coast, and I'm on the West Coast. So once again, for those of you in different time zones, we're pretty, we have variable hours, so that helps a lot. We do have 2 additional webinars. Remember, this is Module 1 of the Performance Data Form. Module 2 gets into performance measures. And so we will have 2 webinars similar to what we just did with the Grantee Survey. The first will be a step-by-step overview of Module 2 and optional Module 3. We say it's intended for new LIHEAP directors and staff, but we also know there's some people who want to get on and get a refresher, and this is the way to do that. It's in 90 minutes. It's line by line. It's pretty detailed. It'll be January 24th at 2 p.m. Eastern. And then we'll have another like this where we just go over very high level. Here are the things that we see most often. Make sure you double check. You know, to make sure you're not making these same errors. That will be on January 31st at 3 p.m. And as with all of these webinars, really think about the staff that you're inviting. It doesn't just have to be the coordinator who then passes this information along. You know, if your IT person is the one who takes the first swipe at completing these reports, if your fiscal person is working on completing these reports, it's valuable to invite them to listen in, as well as to get a hold of us if they need help compiling the report. And we're going to end with questions. And Apprise has put together this very, go ahead, Michelle, I'll let you explain it.
Sure. Hi, everyone. So this is Michelle from Apprise. As Melissa said in the beginning, there's 2 ways for you to ask questions. So you can either type in your question in the text box, and then I'll receive it and read it out to the group to get your question answered. Or if you'd prefer, you can raise your hand, and then I will unmute you, and you can ask your question to the group. So feel free to use either of those methods to ask your question now, or as Melissa said, throughout the presentation, if you don't have a question right now, but you think of one later on, feel free to reach out to any of us and we can work to get your question answered. Okay, it doesn't look like we have any questions, Melissa.
Okay, great. As Michelle mentioned, please feel free if you think of questions to reach out to us. Otherwise, thank you for joining us today, and we look forward to seeing you at the next webinar, which is next week. Thanks so much.